Good morning, Facebook fam.
Good morning. We're back. It's Sue and Dave Robson with Life Source Coaches.
And we are in the midst of resolving quarantine conflict.
Yes.
And if you are like us, you have that. That's probably why you're tuning in, whether that's with your partner, your spouse, your kids, your workmates. This is a high-stress season in conflict. As we talked about in tip number 1, conflict is normal. And we all have different types of responses to conflict. We talked about 5 tips and our 5 responses and types in our tip number 1. Then we moved on to tip number 2, which is about
speaker listener techniques.
There you go.
Use your speaker listener techniques.
And we had our little hats on yesterday.
Yes.
Yeah, we worked on a speaker hat and a listener hat. And so you guys can go and review that. But for today, with tip number 3, is to set yourself up and soften the startup.
Set yourselves up well and soften the startup.
These are kind of speaker tips today, and then when we get into next week, we'll talk about some listener tips and communication tips.
Yeah, so as we talk about the conversation that oftentimes are difficult, there's some tools that predict success, and one of those is setting yourself up for the conversation. And the first thing with that is that timing is everything.
For instance, I can come to Sue and say, hey, I'd like to process our earlier conversation, and then pull out these speaker listener tools. Or when would you be available to do that? And honest confession, it's usually Sue who makes those suggestions and initiations.
I'd like to talk. And his heart rate goes up.
Well, my heart rate was probably already up, and that's the reason she wanted to talk.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
So that first setup tip is timing is everything.
Timing
the second
is everything.
one is that timeouts are okay.
Right. This is a big one. When you're in a conversation and things get heated, we do encourage you to push through. But there comes a point where the heart rate is high, or one person or the other is feeling completely flooded. And at those points, it is very difficult to engage and stay engaged in the conversation. So we do encourage people to take timeouts. For me, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, but for me, I find when I take a timeout, I will journal and navigate my emotions, how I feel, and I'm much more able to put those on the table in a less reactive, less emotionally charged way where Dave is more able to receive it. So timeouts are okay.
Yeah, and sometimes we're afraid to push the pause button and say timeout because we may feel like we'll never get back to it. Or
may not be able to sleep if it's late at night.
Yeah, and Sue, in our wedding vows, Sue made one of her vows was
that I would not let the sun go down on my anger. I wouldn't let the sun go down on my anger. It's a biblical principle. But what I found was that many times we had already started the conversation or the argument after the sun was already down. And we would go late into the night or early into the morning trying to resolve this conversation that never really got anywhere. And so we implemented what was a 24-hour rule, that we would reassure each other. We would say, hey, I'm really, really upset with you right now, and I love you. I'm committed. We'll get through this. Let's try to get some sleep and pick it up in the morning. And we oftentimes found that in the morning, the issue was not so big. So timeouts are okay, and don't be afraid to take them. And if you do find yourself afraid to take them, figure out what's the resistance to that.
Yeah, and that 24-hour rule can apply not only for timeouts, but for initiating the conversation. If we find ourselves stressed out and in conflict, or irritated, or triggered, then we need to say, hey, I need to, process that myself. And like Sue said, a lot of times she'll do some journaling, but then initiate that conversation within 24 hours of that occurring.
Right. And then if you do take that time out to come back with it, come back to it within that 24, or sometimes people have a 48-hour rule, depending on your schedules, your lifestyle, what's going on in life.
And we want to just encourage you that next setup tip is to keep working at it. It may take more than one conversation to deal with whatever the trigger is, whatever the difference of perspective is, whatever that opposition of desires is. Keep working at it.
And check in. I suggest that if you do have a conversation, to say, let's check in on this within a certain time frame, in a week, and put that in your calendar so that you actually do check back in.
Right. And so part of that is making sure you get some action points of how you want to shift and changes you want to make to resolve the conflict or to stay in harmony better. And finally, don't be afraid to ask for help. I know for Sue and I, we have our own life coach, and we will take the bigger issues that we're not able to use these techniques and tools with to resolve and ask for some help in solving the problem.
Or if we just get stuck and we are unable to move forward, we will bring someone else in. We do Zoom coaching with clients all over the world, so it's not necessarily a local thing if you want to reach out to us. And we have a special right now, just a 1-session special that's available on our online calendar.
This COVID season.
Let's get through this coaching together. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Or
you can find that on our website through our contact.
Yeah. Or, seek out a pastor or someone, a mentor couple as well.
Right. So those are some setup tips. And now we want to talk about some soften the startup. John Gottman says that 94% of the time, discussions that start well end well.
Right.
And so we want to give you some startup tips to kind of do a soft start versus a hard start, which is usually what happens with most conflict.
Right.
And that first tip for a soft startup is to use I statements.
Right. So to rather than to say something like, you make me feel stupid. So an I statement would be, I feel incompetent, or I think the story in my head is that you think I'm incompetent when you give me that look.
Yeah. Or I feel shame when we talk about these issues.
Right.
And so try to use your I statements, own and take responsibility on your side of the fence with that. Gottman says that there was kind of 3 techniques there.
Yeah.
I feel
about what, and here's what I need. I feel
hurt.
About what?
About how we interact while we do dishes.
Right. And I need
you just to put the dishes back in the sink or on the clean stack rather than rolling your eyes and grumping.
Yes. We talked about the dishwashing conflict in our tip yesterday. So if you missed that, check it out.
And then a second tip that softens the startup of conflict resolution is focusing on the problem, not the person.
Right. Not to attack the person's intentions. Gottman also says that in the research, he found that when he would go back and ask people, what did you mean when you said this? Or what was your intention here? Almost always the intentions were positive, even when the outcome or the response was negative. So don't attack or assume intentions.
Right. And along these lines, we want to continue to attack the problem, not the person, focus on the issue, rather than that issue slipping aside and attacking each other. Right. And then be careful what language you use. As Sue said, words like always or never. You always, you never, those are not constructive.
It's true. Never, say never. Right? Or always use these tools. Right?
Avoid those absolutes.
Right. If you use those absolutes, it can create defensiveness. It almost always creates defensiveness. And it's really easy to use them. I find even as a coach, and I teach these tools, when I'm really heated and my amygdala is hijacked, I just react and will sometimes say things not the way I intend to. So as we slow it down, as we step back, as we use our tools, it's much easier to engage and have a constructive result.
Yeah, when we go into defense mode, that tends to decrease our ability to collaborate, decrease our ability to be creative and to discuss solutions to this conflict because of our brain activity and our hormone activity has gone up, which makes us uncooperative and unavailable.
Right.
So those are some tips to soften the setup, because all's well that begins well.
Right. So start up well and soften the startup. So that's it for today.
Yeah, we encourage you guys to check out our website, to give some comments about how these are working for you and what are your conflict and quarantine issues. Put those in the comment section as well.
Yeah. So we'll be back next week with 10-minute tips as well on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And we will be offering a communication webinar on the 28th, which will be in the evening, and there'll be some information on our website and eventually in the comments section as well.
Thanks, you guys, for joining us. Have a great day. Blessings as you resolve quarantine conflict. You guys have a good day. Bye-bye.
Blessings.